Welcome to the Lovers Lounge podcast, where we talk to experts and other guests on topics related to love, relationships, and sex. I'm your host, Tina Love, and on this episode, we have Carla Romo. I'm getting a little furball in my throat. Carla Romo is a nationwide speaker. She's a certified dating and relationship coach and author of Contagious Love. She's the love life cheerleader, helping women who feel stuck and stagnant build purpose and confidence in their relationships, dating life, and breakups. Carla has facilitated workshops for hundreds of people, been an expert speaker, featured on or in collaboration with Bravo, Milwaukee Bucks, Cosmopolitan, Bumble, Lifetime, and high-rated iTunes podcast. Welcome, Carla, to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
You know, I am just so happy to have you on the Lovers Lounge. I'm really excited to talk with you on the topic of codependency and your book, Contagious Love. I feel like we're like kindred spirits because I feel like we have so much in common, and we'll find that out as we continue with our talk today. So welcome again.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm super excited. I love talking about codependency and how to break free of it. So This will be really fun.
Yeah, because, you know, I can guess that there's probably a lot of ladies who have experienced this, maybe in their past, or maybe they're still continuing to experience this. And there's probably some student who's in college right now who is probably experiencing this as well. And maybe even men, because men can be codependent too, right?
Absolutely. So it actually can go both ways. And I didn't learn this until I was doing research for my book, Contagious Love, Break Free from Codependency for Damn Good, that up to 90% of us are codependent.
Right.
That is a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Those statistics are astounding. So before we can, kind of talk about your book and everything, I want to talk about your career professionally, because you were in politics before you switched to coaching and helping women. Can you talk about that?
You did your research. I love this. So I actually worked in television, and then I ran for West Hollywood City Council. And, I was on the Women's Advisory Board of West Hollywood. I'm an activist.
Yeah.
And so that is very much my core, my heart. I've always been an activist, though. I mean, even since I was in high school, I was running petitions and meeting with the school board over things and different policies. And so I even look at my work as a coach today, also as activism of helping people who were in abusive relationships and helping them break free of these thoughts that trap us, right? This power control.
Yeah.
And I very much so have worked on statewide legislation, local legislation of California when I was living in Los Angeles at the time, all around domestic violence and women's issues.
Great.
And so that women's equality and women's equity is really what I'm passionate about at the core of who I am as a person.
That's awesome. Very, very good. Very good.
Yeah.
That's good to hear. And so you decided that, you've accomplished a lot, and you've decided that you'd write the book Contagious Love. And it sounds like you actually had a personal relationship at like 24 years old in which you
I did.
hit rock bottom, and that led you to writing the book. And it helped you to, prompt you to helping women. So tell me about your journey. Tell me about that story. Take me back at 24.
So I always say that, even since I was little, I just had this distorted idea of what healthy relationships were. I really just wanted validation. I grew up with domestic violence. My father was abusive. And so as a result, I just didn't love myself. I didn't know what healthy love looked like, especially with men. And I found myself in codependent relationships, one after the other,
Yeah.
really thinking like, if I could fix these people or they could see how amazing I was, I could show that I'm worthy of being loved, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't until my early 20s when I was 24 years old and I was in an abusive relationship. It was very toxic. And I saw two paths in front of me. And I always say this is like my aha moment, my spiritual awakening moment, where I went on a solo trip to Ireland. And I was standing in the Wicklow forest, and I just had this beautiful moment with myself where I realized I was going to be okay regardless of what happened.
Yeah.
And if that meant leaving the relationship and stepping into the relationship with myself, then that I would be okay in doing. And so it was these two paths. It was continue self-sabotage, continue these toxic relationships over and over and over again, or step into the relationship with myself, create boundaries, create self-love, create self-care, just build myself up with love, and then be able to relate that to intimate, healthy relationships. What are red flags? How to communicate, how to talk with your partner,
Right.
those types of things. And so I ended that abusive relationship. And I always say that I begun the most important relationship with myself when I did that. And I say it's a journey. It's always a journey, the relationship with yourself. It's always evolving. But at the end of the day, I have myself.
Yeah.
And so that is what I was able to get out of that.
Yeah. You just shared a whole lot. I want to take a step back.
Yeah.
When you talk about being in an abusive relationship, I used to teach violence and abuse to middle school and high school students, actually also elementary students as well. Um,
That's amazing.
yeah, and so we would do a survey, and it'd be very interesting because the students would you know uh, perform the survey and everything, and many times if you just walked in and you started to say, ask them if they're in an abusive relationship, they wouldn't really understand. Or the first thing they would think when you say abuse is they would think physical abuse, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what many people, when you say abusive
Yep.
relationship, everybody thinks, oh my God, he's beating her up, you know. But there are many forms of abuse. So can you
Yeah.
talk about the types of abuse that you found yourself experiencing in this abusive relationship? Because there could be somebody out there, and I do this for this reason, that's listening and they really don't identify yet with
Yep.
what you're talking about. And I want to make sure that as we do this interview, that whomever is listening, if they are in an abusive relationship, I want them to identify and see where they are. So let's
Yeah.
talk about the types of abuse that you may
I
have
actually
experienced. Yeah.
love, I love that you're breaking this down because I
Yeah.
think it's so important. Because at the time, I didn't know it was abuse. I thought it was normal. And so, what was important for me is to recognize that manipulation is abuse, right?
Yes.
Having somebody put down women in front of me, right? Like, oh, they, like as degrading women as if like all they're good for is sex or that's, their purpose in life. Also, gaslighting is a great
Yes.
form
Please
of
break it
abuse
down.
where,
Yes.
yeah, okay, all right. So, gaslighting can look like a bunch of different things.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be as simple as having a conversation with someone. Maybe you had a disagreement and, okay, whatever. And then when you bring it back up or you talk about it, that person denies that it happened. So, it could be as simple as, and I'm going to use just a really generic example so that people just get it.
Please.
It could be, I went to the store and I bought white bread. And they could say, no, you bought wheat bread. And you could say, no, I bought white bread. What are you talking about? Like, no, you didn't. You bought the wheat bread. What are you talking about? And and then all of a sudden you think, did I buy wheat bread? I
Yes.
swear I bought white bread. And then you're like, oh my gosh. And you look at the receipt and sure enough, you bought white bread, right? But this person is making you feel like you bought wheat bread.
Yes.
And they're telling you like this, what are you talking about? Are you all right? Like, and they start to question your sanity,
Right.
which then in return allows you to question your sanity.
Right. Because
And anybody can go ahead.
I was going to say, because they're so convincing when they speak back to you and tell you about what you've done or what they
Yes.
heard you say or whatever. They're so convincing and so strong in their conviction that you did this,
Yes.
that you start to almost kind of question like, oh my God, like, wait a minute, did I do that? And it really,
Exactly.
really can play mind games with you. Really, that's what it's all
Yep.
about. Gaslighting.
Yep.
It's really
Yep.
playing mind games.
Yes, it's playing mind games, and it's not the kind of games that everyone talks about with dating, like you're playing games. No, it's it's a form of manipulation, and it's a form of abuse, really, of thinking that one thing is happening, being told something else is, and then it's like your reality feels altered, and so you start to question your own sanity. And sometimes people become so distant from their own sanity that they think they're crazy. And that's
Yeah.
another symptom of abuse. It's feeling like you're the crazy one in the relationship. Like,
Mm-hmm.
am I crazy? Like, this just keeps happening. Like, or gosh, I must be the crazy one. Here I all along was thinking that this happened, but I guess this happened. And I just interpreted it that way, right? So
Right.
justifying. Another big symptom is painting red flags green. So there's red flags, right? And you can look in so many different things. Like a red flag that you see somebody texting somebody else, like another, the opposite sex or same sex, depending on what relationship you're in, but
Right.
in an intimate way, right? And then them hiding it from you. And usually that's a lot of times where gaslighting will come in. So that is an example of like, what do you mean I'm not texting anybody? I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know. I wasn't texting anyone. And then you think, okay, I guess I'm crazy. I guess I'm the paranoid one. Another form of abuse is jealousy, strong
Mm-hmm.
jealousy. And that's, with anybody, anything. It doesn't have to be it with a romance and, in the sense of like intimacy, right? Or sexual or whatever. It could literally be even in a form of family. So they separate you from what you have around you. So, oh, I don't like your friends. They're not nice to me. And maybe they really make a great case for why they don't like your friends. So then all of a sudden you feel isolated and you
Yeah.
feel like, oh man, okay, well, I can't hang out with my boyfriend and my friends because they don't like that person and this person doesn't like that my friends. And so it creates an isolation around you. And that's a lot of
Yes.
times what abusers try to do. They try to get you so that you are at a weak point. And this doesn't happen overnight. This is something that can happen over months,
Right.
over years. And there are red flags, though.
Yeah.
That's the thing. There are red flags to
Right.
abuse that are overlooked because you're excited that somebody loves you or somebody cares
Giving you
about you.
attention. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The
Hmm.
isolation thing is huge because what
Yes.
tends to happen then is that as you distance yourself from family and friends and you're
Hmm.
only around this person, then you're just exposed to that person so much that all you hear is that person's voice. And oftentimes,
Hmm.
maybe subconsciously or consciously, that might be the abuser's objective.
Yes.
Because many times
Right.
they may want you only to hear their voice,
Yep.
because they know that if you hear others' voices that might be much healthier than yours or theirs, they may tell you that's really not right, or that's really
Hmm.
not normal, or
Hmm.
that's not acceptable. Like that person shouldn't do that to you. And because, and you even said it earlier, Carla, you may have grown up in a situation where
Yep.
you experienced abuse and it was something that you saw all the time, you may not recognize that that's not normal or that's not right
Yes.
or that's not acceptable. And so if you're just around that person and you only hear their voice, then you're just going to continue to spiral into that dysfunctionalism. But if you're
Hmm.
with other people and you're able to hear the other healthier voices, then oftentimes you're able to hear something that tells you maybe this is not a good idea and you start to learn. But
Hmm.
again,
Yep.
sometimes it's the objective of the abuser to isolate you and only have you around their voice so that you
Hmm.
don't hear those things. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's all power control.
it
That's
is
what it comes down to.
all around
Yep.
power and control. And if you are, in a situation where perhaps there is physical abuse, um,
Hmm.
oftentimes you might hear something like, well, if you wouldn't have done this, then
Yes.
I wouldn't have done this. And if it's just you, and if you would
Yes.
just change or wouldn't do
Yep.
that, then I wouldn't do what I've done. You make me do this.
Or you were asking for it.
Yeah.
All of those different things. Exactly. And the funny thing is, too, is that a lot of times like you had shared earlier, we only think that abuse is physical. And we actually only think about abuse in our society as men doing it to women. But women also are, I just
Yes.
read this research study that was done, and it says that it's actually equal of what abuse that happens, at least verbal abuse, emotional abuse, that happens in relationships, whereas women are just as equal to be abusive as men are.
Oh, yeah.
So I found that very interesting. And I
Yeah.
think it's something, too, that as a society and a culture, we create shame around men to come forward who are being abused.
Yeah, and I've seen it. I've had family members, men who have been in abusive relationships, and it's really hard for a man because
Hmm.
first of all, it's totally embarrassing for them because they don't want to let anybody know that this is happening, especially if it's
Right.
physical, right? You don't
Mhm.
want to call the
Yeah.
police and say my girlfriend's
Yep.
beating up on me, number one.
Mhm.
Number two, men sort of feel, or they have this thing where they're meant to be right, strong, right? And they're meant to
Yeah.
like take care of and whatever. And
Right.
so they don't want to really admit that this is happening and that they can't change the situation because sort of it makes them feel like, well, am I weak or is there something wrong with
Yep.
me that I can't make this woman change or stop doing this? And so it's really difficult when it's the other way around too. It really
Yeah.
is.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. So I want to go into now, we've talked about all the forms of abuse. And oh, I do want to mention also one other, because many times I would talk to the girls about this in school. When someone is cheating on you,
Mm.
that is
Yep.
abuse.
That
When
is
they
abuse. Yes.
when
Thank
they
you for
re-
saying that. Yep.
yes, when they repeatedly over and over again, that's what abuse is. When things happen
Mhm.
repeatedly over and over again, that is abuse. And if they're cheating on you and lying to you, that is
Yep.
abusive.
Yeah.
That's
It
abusive.
is. Yep.
I just want to make sure I said that because there
Nope.
might
I
be
love
some
that you said that.
not clear.
Yep.
But at any rate, there was a time then, of course, when you realized that this was happening. And so what do you think was the underlying fear that you had that kept holding you to the relationships? What was that underlying thing that
Of
really kept you
fully,
in? Yeah.
yeah, of fully being alone and feeling not loved. That at the end of the day, that is what tied me back. I don't think I'm going to be okay if I'm alone, right? I don't think I'm enough. I don't think I'm worthy. I mean, you could fill in whatever it is, the I am, not statements, right? All of those things is really what that fear was, that deep rooted fear of like, oh no, I'm going to be alone. I'm not going to be able to find somebody who loves me. When really I needed to love myself. That was
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
That was the key secret to it, right? Like all this time I was looking, in men and all these toxic codependent relationships and blah blah blah, and then I hit this rock bottom with this really toxic relationship, and that is really at the end of the day what it was.
When you decided enough is enough, because yeah,
Yep.
I would say oftentimes I've seen, women perhaps in domestic violence relationships, where it's really that fear, it's that false
Hmm.
evidence appearing real. It's, and God forbid if the person that you're in the relationship with is actually telling you that you'll never find anybody else besides them.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
And then you're
Hmm.
isolated and that's the only voice you hear. We're going back to that again. God forbid
Yep.
that's happening. So yeah, it's that
Yeah.
that underlying fear that holds
Yep.
you and keeps you there. So
Yep.
then you reach the point, enough is enough. So now that you look back and you recognize, that wasn't the only relationship, there were others.
Hmm.
Um, how do you encourage women then to break this cycle and to get out? How do you get them to realize that they can step away because
Yeah.
there's so much fear?
Well, I think what's important is having a really healthy foundation of support around you, whether it's friends, family, and that can be hard because your friends and family might have distanced themselves from you because you keep putting yourself in a
Yeah.
situation of, and it's self-sabotage of being with a partner and coming and leaving. I think it's about, and correct me if I'm wrong with this, but I believe it's about 6 times that a woman tries to leave her abuser until she's finally done.
Yeah.
And so a lot of abusive relationships, it's this push and pull, push and pull, push and pull, and it's a cycle, right? And I'm not saying it's your fault, right? If you're in this cycle of abuse, right? That's not your fault that somebody's treating you this way.
Mm-hmm.
But what is important is to take responsibility in your choices and to recognize that you have choices. You are not a victim. You are, and yes, there's a place and time to be a victim. Okay, I'm not discrediting it. I'm not saying you aren't a victim to abuse or anything like that. But to recognize that you do not have to be in a victim mentality to make a choice to leave. So it's recognizing and putting the power back in your hands, saying, you know what, enough's enough. I don't have to live under these rules that maybe you created for yourself or rules that this person has convinced you into believing or whatever it is, but to say, I'm worthy enough to make a choice for myself and to recognize that I do have options. I have choices and to tell people what's going on. That is so important because at this point, I probably have a lot of shame, a lot of fear, embarrassment
Yeah.
around really wanting to share this with other people because you have self judgment. Oh, how did I choose a partner like this? What's wrong with me? Those types of things, those thoughts. But ultimately, it's creating the options. It's recognizing you have choices. It's surrounding yourself around people. And it's really saying that I choose me
Okay.
and I choose my safety and my health first.
Okay. You've said so much, Carla. Oh my God. So first off, you talked about friends who may have kind of stepped away from you because
Yeah.
they've watched you go back repeatedly. So maybe you've
Hmm.
spoken to, this is the point I'm getting to, maybe you've told friends, what's going on. And of course, friends are very protective, right? Because you're their friend
Hmm.
and they get
Yep.
pretty angry because now they've seen and you've went ahead and you've confessed to them that these things are happening. And so your friends are angry and they're mad and they are saying you need to get away from this person. Like this is not right. And
Hmm.
then, you said 6 times. So maybe throughout these times that you've said this to your friends, this person, the abuser, has come back into your life
Hmm.
and they've said to you in the honeymoon cycle and phase of cycle of violence, I'll never do this again. I am so sorry. I love you so much. I can't do without you. I'm so sorry. I promise I'll never do it again. You go ahead and you believe them. Now, what's going on with your friends, first of all? What's going on with your friends? If they've seen you do this a couple of times, then they've decided to do what, Carla?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So, a lot of times when you have a friend who's going through this, or maybe your friends are experiencing this,
Mm,
right?
right.
They feel angry and maybe they feel even angry toward you because they
Yeah.
know that you deserve better.
Yeah.
And so it's not that I always look at it as it's not that they don't love you or they don't appreciate you, but sometimes too, friends have to have boundaries for what's healthy for them. That
Yeah.
sometimes it's not healthy for them to be involved in a friendship where this is the situation, this is what's really happening, and
Yeah.
they have to distance themselves.
Yeah.
So it's beyond just you. Like if you're listening to this right now and you maybe identify with some of this, it's beyond just you and the relationship. It's affecting the others around you who love and care about you.
Right. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we pointed that out because there could be friends that have distanced themselves from you because it hurts them really bad to see you hurt.
Exactly.
And
Yep.
so, in order to take care of themselves, they may have distanced themselves from you. Now, I want to go to the person who is being abused side now. She may also feel, or he, embarrassed that he is or she is going back and forth with this abuser when maybe they really realize that this is really not a good idea and they feel bad that they're doing this. Could that possibly, Carla, drive them to not share what's going on, as they move forward? So to start keeping secrets because they don't want to next time do the same thing and then their friends get mad at them. Is that
Yep.
possible?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I think that happens very frequently where you start to withhold information or you only tell certain bits and pieces of the story. And my whole thing is like, you're only lying to yourself,
Yeah,
right? You're
yeah,
in denial of the abuse. That's really what's underneath it all. So, maybe you feel like, okay, like, well, I don't want my friends to get mad. They always get mad at me. They don't understand, right?
right.
But who really doesn't understand? Yourself. You don't understand, right? Like, because you're in denial of it.
Yeah,
And it's when you can come forward and say, okay, this is happening and you're not lying to yourself anymore. That's when you really actually step into freedom because that's when you're saying, okay, this is what's happening. Now I can take action. I can make choices around it.
right. Which is what you did. So, what do you
Yep.
say to friends that if their friend who is being abused finally says enough is enough? Now, you as the friend who has heard your friend say this before, you might be thinking, yeah, she said that before and then she went right back to here, whatever. So,
Hmm.
what do you say, Carla, to those friends that, should they believe the friend? I mean, how do they handle this? Because they may be thinking, you know what, I've heard this before, that we know where this is going, but maybe not. So, what do you say to those friends that may be sort of teetering on whether or not to embrace this friend who is being abused again and help her or him make a decision to get out?
I would say have boundaries for yourself. Like at the end of the day, like, show up. You can say to your friend, look, if you really are ready to leave, I'm here and I'm going to be here with you and I can support you if that's what you want to take on. Okay. Sometimes that's too much for people. But I would say if you really want to show up for your friend and you want to be there, let your friend know, look, if you're willing to leave and this is it and this is the end of this relationship with this person, I'm willing to support you, be there for you, and leave it at that. Because I think what's important is to let your friend know that you have boundaries and to let your friend know that, look, I know what's been going on. I care about you. I love you,
Yeah,
but I'm only gonna I can only show up if you're ready to leave.
very good.
And then if you're the friend, watch your friend's actions. See if he or she is deciding to leave. If they're not and they seem to be going back in that cycle, then okay, this is too much for me. Unfortunately, I always say detach with love. So it's, being able to separate yourself from them in a loving way, but not in a hurtful, cutting off, hateful way.
Okay. All right. So now I want to move into the codependency. Now that we've kind of shown the situation, the problem, how it looks, all of that, I think we've identified that. It's codependency at the root of it, too. Not only fear of getting out, but there's some codependency that keeps the person in the relationship as well. Can you explain or break down exactly what codependency is?
Yep. So basically, I always say, nobody could get it together on what the exact definition was for codependency, which I think is hilarious. But there's a bunch of definitions that are very similar. And basically, what it means is that you are in a relationship, and it can be working relationship. It doesn't have to be an intimate partner. It could be family, a friend, that kind of thing. But you're in a relationship with somebody who's not taking care of themselves, whether it's mentally, whether it's addiction, it's abuse, whatever it is, right? And they're not taking care of themselves. And ultimately, as a result, you, as a codependent, lose your sense of self, lose your sense of self care, well being. And so you become completely immersed into this person's life. And that is on a spectrum. So you might have somebody whose parent gets sick. And for a couple of months, you lose a sense of yourself because you're taking care of them. You're neglecting your needs for them. Or you can have the other side of the spectrum where you're with somebody who is an addict
Mm-hmm.
and isn't taking care of their addiction. And as a result, you're so immersed in saving them, fixing them, trying to help them that you neglect every single aspect of your life.
Yep. That's it. That is
Yep.
it. That's it. And I and I'm sitting here thinking about, because as we were talking about, friends that you see that are on a downward spiral in their life as far as a relationship, or maybe it's like you said, the person who's in, that's addicted to gambling, or a person who's addicted to drugs, you know, or God forbid if you've ever grown up in a household as a child of an alcoholic or addict. You just have this thing about you that you feel like there's something you should be able to do to turn them around or to fix them or to help them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in your trying to do that, it actually affects you. How does it affect you, Carla, when you're trying and you're
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, it affects, you as a person because here you are trying to solve the other person's problem. And actually, this is where I say is it's not your business to get into anybody's, mental health or addiction or food addiction. I mean, whatever it is, right? It's not your job to fix it. It's not your job to take care of them, but you become so consumed over this idea of I won't be okay unless they're okay, right? It's like this whole underlying thought. And you take on this level of responsibility that you neglect every aspect, your hobbies, your self-care, your friendships,
Okay.
just things that are basic interest to you. All of those things are what you neglect.
I see. Which is how it negatively affects you in your effort to try and fix and help somebody else. So, are
Yeah.
you saying, Carla, that if somebody is, dating someone with a mental illness, they're having a really hard time. Maybe they have a depressive disorder, or they are a gambler, or they're addicted to drugs. Maybe you don't even know, or you're finding out slowly but surely that there's an issue. Um, are you saying, Carla, then that the person should run right away, or what's a balance? I guess I'm looking at there has to be some balance there. Can they be in
Right.
a relationship with somebody who has mental illness and depressive disorder? Or is it that if you find out, you should run for the hills? I don't know. I'm just trying to help
Right.
somebody who might be listening because, maybe, there are many people who have mental illness who are
Yes.
experiencing difficulty, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you know that it's negative for them. So how do we help people out here, Carla, with this?
I think this area can become really gray and it's not so black and white.
Yeah.
So really, I think the first evaluation is check in with yourself. How are you showing up in the relationship? Because codependency isn't about the other person. It's actually about your behavior to the other person. And so what is really important first to recognize and to see is how are you showing up in the relationship? What are you doing? Are you trying to change them? Are you trying to fix them? Are you researching rehab facilities online to send them? I mean, all of these things,
Right.
right?
Right.
And the thing is that there's nothing you can do until somebody's ready to get sober or change their eating habits or gambling or mental health. That's on them, right? But I think what is important here is check in with yourself. How are you showing up? If you are showing up in a toxic way where you're neglecting getting together with friends, or you're not sharing with friends and family what's really going on because you're hiding and making excuses for your partner, those are all red flags to your behavior and codependency. If you're aware of what's happening and you happen to have tools of working around codependency and keeping clear boundaries and taking care of yourself, and I always say staying on your side of the street, so
Mm-hmm.
not getting on someone else's side of the street into
Mm-hmm.
their business. If you have tools of that and you can manage it on a day to day, then okay, that doesn't mean you need to run for the hills, right? It just you have to have an acknowledgement and a level of awareness that this is a situation you're in. And I do believe that everybody has something. I do. I feel, and some have a
Right.
lot worse levels than others. I mean, everybody suffers. I truly believe, whether it's diagnosed or they're aware or not, I
Right.
believe everybody suffers from something.
Especially
So
today. Oh God.
exactly,
Just
yes.
yeah.
So I think here what's important is how are you showing up to the relationship? If you are showing up and it's toxic for you, that might be some time to take a step back and say, okay, where can I get help here? And then pursuing resources for help. And if the help isn't working, or you find that the relationship actually is just not healthy for you, it's abusive, right? You can be codependent in abusive relationships with narcissistic personality disorder.
Mm-hmm.
If you're finding that you're putting yourself at risk, then that is time to reevaluate the relationship. But I do believe that if you have the tools and you're working with somebody and outside resources and things like that to really help yourself through a time like this, it actually can be a really amazing time for relationships. And I'm not giving hope that somebody will get sober and then the relationship will change. And
Right.
a lot of times somebody gets sober and actually, like, the person who was the codependent towards the person who has the addiction is the one struggling the most at that point, because there's something that's tying them to the fixing that they're not able to do anymore.
Oh yeah.
So it's really checking in with your own behavior.
Oh yeah. I'll never forget. I used to work as a family group counselor for a or an alcohol and drug abuse center, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it would be my job on the weekends to do a family group with these people, and families would come in. And so I'm talking about, girlfriends of a person who is addicted, or a mother or a father of a person who is addicted. And it would be my job to help them understand codependency and the part that
Mm-hmm.
they are playing in the whole
Yeah.
cycle.
Yes.
And I would
Yeah.
oftentimes get cursed out, and because
Sure.
they didn't understand that and oftentimes they would say, well, if that person would just, get better, then we'll be
Yes.
fine. I don't even know why I'm here at this family
Mm.
group, because I really don't have a
Mm-hmm.
problem. But what they would
Yep.
slowly start to see is that, they were probably as much of a problem as the person who was addicted. And
Yep.
so when they would start to realize that they were playing a part in the whole vicious cycle of what was happening, it would be a very rude awakening for some. And
Mhm.
some people would, yeah, curse me out and tell me, go to hell. But then some people would come back and they would realize that they did need to change, that there was a part of them that was actually making, or not really, I won't say making this person, but, it
Mhm.
just wasn't healthy for the person who was
Contributing
trying to
to
get better.
the chaos.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So now in your book, speaking of tools, you help women, you say, to become, this is quotations, badass navigators of relationships. So what does that entail, Carla? What does that entail?
A badass navigator. So I think what's important is to be able to navigate your own space, right? Be able to say what you want, speak up for yourself, really get to know yourself while being a badass, right? Because I believe that we're all badass. At the end of the day, we all have, and this is what I always call in the book, your confident warrior.
Mm-hmm.
It's this like inner awesome person that's inside you. And it can feel so suppressed when you're in codependency that you lose yourself. You don't have any direction. You don't know where to go. And I think when you're looking at being a badass navigator and you're looking at really taking steps to improve yourself, improve your life, break free from codependency, you have to have direction. You have to know where you want to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that is what actually hurts people, is not having direction. And I make a joke in the book as well about getting a life. And I tell clients that when they come to me, say, all right, it's time for you to get a life.
Get a
And
life.
they always laugh, and I say it with humor, but there's so much truth into it.
Yeah.
What are your hobbies? What do you like to do? What is your favorite color? What interests you?
Yeah.
Because when you become so consumed by someone else and what they're doing and whatever, you don't have a life and you don't have anywhere to navigate and to go.
Right. And that's a part of that awakening I was talking about, where you have to realize that you've kind of gotten away from who you are because you've been so
Yeah.
engrossed in and so obsessed with fixing and taking care of this person and what they're doing. And so getting back to who you are. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you actually
Yeah.
have some tangible action steps that you give to help break the cycle of codependency and help them build a more healthy relationship with themselves or with others.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share some of
Yeah.
those action steps that you talk about in your book?
Yeah. So, I think throughout the entire book, really, I share action steps that is all encompassing
Mm-hmm.
of breaking free from codependency. So it's not just, okay, this is a one size fits all kind of thing, but it's how do you look at action steps within self love, right?
Mm-hmm.
In my chapter, like Love Your Damn Self, right? I talk about self love. Just even saying I love you to yourself in the mirror. It's putting yourself first. Sounds so easy, but it's so difficult when you're really in this cycle of codependency.
Yeah.
And another one as well is, and I talk about in the book, dodging the red flags, not painting red flags green, being able to look at a red flag and say, okay, you know what? I'm going to follow this. I'm going to truly follow this.
Right.
And say, you know what? My gut feels off. Follow your damn gut. You know what? If something feels off, it probably is. And
Yeah.
so,
If it walks like a duck,
and
quacks like a duck, it's a duck. Yeah.
exactly. And really just being able to take a step back and say, okay, what is going on here that I'm not being truthful with myself? It's back to that denial piece. So just being honest with yourself, telling your friends and family what's going on. We talked about the whole friends thing, but really sharing and being open with them gives you someone to have accountability with. So telling your friends like, hey, this is happening, or your family, this is what's going on, gets it out in the open. So then you no longer can really just hide really what's going on.
Yeah.
Another one is about finding your damn voice. So speaking up, being able to communicate, sharing how you feel, but also allowing you to stay on your side of the street. So a lot of times when we're in codependent relationships, we want to tell somebody how to live their life,
Oh
right?
God, yes. Yes.
We think we know what's best, right? But you don't know what's best. And so what is important is to find your voice, so that you have a voice. You can speak up, you can create boundaries, you can just create the life that protects you, that really protects your self-care and self-love.
Yeah.
So those are, I mean, all of those different things, right, are just accumulation of different action steps that you can really take, that I talk about in the book, around really breaking free
Yeah.
and holding yourself accountable
Yeah.
and being honest with yourself, trusting yourself, you know, everything like that. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but I
Yep.
won't bore you all
Yep.
day.
Yep. Yep. No, no, no. It's good because when you were saying it and staying on your side of the street and all that, it started to remind me of something that I used to teach my family group clients. Is
Hmm.
basically we get something sort of like a sign. It was a not my job. So you would know, when you're reaching that point where you're getting to where you're about to cross the street, and get on the other
Mm-hmm.
side, you stop and you're like, okay, wait a minute, not my job. So you start to figure out it's not my job to tell this person, what they're supposed to do. Like they're their own person, they have to make their own choices and decisions and those kind of things. So that was funny. When you were saying that, it made me think of that. Yeah.
I love that. That's a great visual.
Not my job. So,
Yep.
how can the listening audience reach out to you, hear more from you? I mean, you have a website, social media. I mean, you're cute as a button. I know you've got something out
Thank
there
you.
because I just saw
I
that picture
do.
was so cute. I'm like, oh, look at Carla. She's just so cute. So
Oh,
anyway,
thank you. That's so sweet.
how can the listening
Yeah.
audience reach out to you?
You can find me on Instagram at I am Carla Romo. That's Carla with a C, Romo like Tony Romo, Romo. My website is also iamcarlaromo.com. And if you want to buy the book, Contagious Love, you can go to my website, and if you put in the notes that you saw or heard me on the podcast, then put in the notes that you heard me on the podcast, and I'll sign the book for you. So you can get a copy of the book, Contagious Love.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Carla, for
Thank
being,
you.
oh my gosh, a guest on the show. I really hope that this resonated with someone because, I mean, codependency it's so common. And sometimes we
It
do it and we
is.
don't even really realize we're doing it. I mean, parents
Yep,
can be codependent on their child. I know sometimes I can
absolutely.
kind of step across the street with my son and I have to remember, oh, not my job. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So anyway, so thanks so much. I hope that somebody learns something from this and maybe it's inspiring them to do something different than they've been doing. So I want to
Yeah,
thank you so
I
much
hope so too.
for coming on. Yeah. And guys, I hope that you guys have enjoyed the show and hope that you will continue to listen. Remember, the show can be heard on Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. And now, select episodes on Thursday nights on TOKOVL Internet Radio. It's at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time and 10 p.m. Eastern. Don't forget to like, rate, subscribe, and or leave comments on the show. And you can also reach out to me at the Lovers Lounge at yahoo.com. Thanks for listening to the Lovers Lounge podcast, where we talk to experts and other guests on topics related to love, relationships, and sex. I'm your host, Tina Love. And until next time, peace. And don't forget, love.